Hello, Red Nail Energy listeners. It's Mikhail, and I am coming at you fresh off of an international Europe trip. It is Thursday when I record this. I got home late Tuesday night, and I am feeling so refreshed and energized and revived, and also really excited to be back with you all. I had a lot of moments throughout the trip where I just had this really deep sense of knowing this is what I'm meant to be doing. And also felt it so necessary to take that time for myself to really just unplug. I brought my laptop. I had a lot of plans to get some work done while I was there, and I didn't, and that's fine. And I actually think that sometimes when we give ourselves time to quote recharge and we end up doing these little tasks and things throughout it, we end up actually draining ourselves even more. And so for me, I try to be all there wherever I am. And so when I'm vacationing or when I'm with friends or when I'm at an event, I really try to be 100% there and give myself the ability to really soak up that experience, knowing that when I'm on to the next thing, the last thing I want is to look back on that time and say to myself, I just wish I had been more present, or I wish that I had really soaked in what I was doing and not been distracted or like returning emails on my phone or feeling like there's something that is so urgent. Because at the end of the day, there's really nothing so urgent that it can't wait while we give ourselves time to recharge. And if something is that urgent, we will know, and it will be 100% requiring of our attention. So those little tasks, if you had the chance to listen to my interview with Anya Grace, we talked a lot about energy leaks. And I think that a lot of the time, trying to be in more than one place is such an energy leak. So being at happy hour with friends, but seeing emails come through and try to respond to emails while also listen to your friends who are chatting with you about their week, or watching your kids at the park while multitasking and trying to make your Amazon purchases that need to be updated, or whatever it may be. Especially as women, I will speak for us kind of as a collective. I think we are really good at having multiple tabs open in our brain. But then because of that, we end up giving all of these opportunities for energy leaks to come in because we're never really all in one place. And so I just challenge you, wherever you are, be all there. And that is so much easier said than done. I totally recognize that. I'm with you. It's a daily struggle for me as well. But this trip especially gave me a lot of opportunities to put myself in check when I would figure out what my routine is. Do my eyes open and the first thing I do is grab my phone and start scrolling? Yep, I'm human. That's what I do. And I started asking myself which ones of those habits are even helpful. And I traveled with two of my really good girlfriends. And so it was really fun getting to wake up and be in the same place and make our Nespresso pods and sit and kind of like debrief the night, or just like have a slow morning before we went and worked out or did what we were going to do that day together. And I think that helped me recognize too that when I'm alone, some of my habits are really not serving of me, but I don't really even think about it because I'm by myself. And so nothing is really keeping me in check. Nothing is questioning whether what I'm doing is productive or not, because it's just me and my dog and she lets me do whatever I want to do. And so I think it was a good opportunity for me to just reflect a little bit and ask myself again, what are the things I'm doing every day? Are they helpful? Are they serving me, or are they not? Um, when I chose to sit down and record this solo today, the main thing that kept coming to mind is this notion and kind of construct of being able to pause and zoom out no matter what we're facing or experiencing in our life. And so the theme of this conversation and episode is really going to be that zoom out to dive in, to form a deeper relationship with self, with those around you, with those you love, with whatever it is you may be doing. Giving ourselves the opportunity to look at things from a new perspective or a new vantage point is such an incredible gift to ourselves and everyone else involved, because it allows ourselves to not only see things through this very narrow focus that we often completely unintentionally and subconsciously and accidentally fall into. And for me, travel is one of the biggest ways that I'm allowed to zoom out without even really having to try. I left the corporate world, and my initial plan was to maybe rebrand this podcast, maybe explore a little bit of community building, but really just dive into my writing, finish a fiction novel I'm working on, really have time for myself where I wake up for a few days and I'm like, what do I want to do today? I have nothing going on. and true to my nature, instead of doing any of those things, I built an entire company from the ground up in like 6 weeks. And I'm so incredibly proud of that. And I'm still working out some of the kinks in regards to the membership platform that is going to be launching very soon. I'm so excited for that. I have such big dreams to create a community that is like a new age form of social media. I want to give all of us a space where we can come as we are. We can feel supported and seen and celebrated. We can sort of, in a sense, like in a sick sense, if I'm being honest, fulfill that dopamine rush that social media gives us, but with something that we know we're going to leave and feel better than when we started. Whereas with social media, more often than not, we may feel neutral or we may feel worse. And I just think that there are ways to curate content and what it is that our brain is seeing and absorbing and taking in a way that it's productive. There's like micro learning that happens, there's expansion that happens, there's the opportunity to grow with one another, lean on one another, feel the support of what somebody else is experiencing in a positive way when maybe we're in a little bit more of a low. And so I have these really exciting big plans for that, but I have to be patient. And that's been really difficult to know that I can envision this finish line, but I have to go from point like A to A.1, A.2, A.3, B.1, B. I can't just go from point A to point Z. And in many ways, the initial building phase of Red Nail Energy felt like going from A to Z because I was moving so quickly and things were coming together and happening. And I had these tangible ways of marking my progress. And now I'm at a place where things are naturally and understandably kind of reaching a plateau in some ways, and sometimes feeling like they're dipping and then rising and dipping and rising. And so is the entire crux of the entrepreneurial journey. And on my Peloton ride this morning, the instructor said, there's no such thing as failure, there's only incomplete success. And that really, really resonated with me because she then said the only time something becomes a failure is if you stop. If you stop trying, if you stop pushing, if you stop moving forward. And again, failure is not always bad. There are things that would be considered failure to one person that to somebody else is a huge success. Ending a relationship that is not going anywhere or not serving you, ending a marriage, choosing to end a career or start something new. Those are things that maybe some people would say like, well, I failed at this because I tried it and I'm no longer doing it. But what if it opens so many more doors or it leads to happiness? I just think that the term failure and success are both very relative. And one of the biggest things I'm personally keeping in check right now is the orientation in ensuring I'm going to the exact degree in which I want to travel and I'm moving toward the direction in which I want to go. And that direction is not $1,000,000. That direction is not fame and fortune. I think that when we put that as like the compass in which we're following, we will fail. And fail, in my terms of that, is be unsatisfied, unfulfilled, not having passion being a driving force, not having connection. I just think that when we put things at the forefront of our motivation that aren't actually fulfilling and are maybe more superficial or for more, I don't even know what the word is, like self-fulfilling or self-serving prophetic reasons, we will end up over and over and over again being disappointed and constantly having this nagging within us, telling us there's more, there's more, there's more, and never feeling like we're able to reach it. Whereas for me, I have one conversation with somebody that is like, oh my gosh, yes, I feel seen. I'm like, thank you so much. This episode really resonated with me. My right hand, Clarice, who I love dearly, shared with me yesterday that the newsletter I put out brought her to tears and gave her the opportunity to forgive herself for something that she's been holding on to for so long. And that was completely unintentional. You know, she works for me, works with Red Nail Energy, is somebody that is not at the forefront of my mind necessarily for the audience in which I'm putting things out. And yet yesterday, we were able to have a moment where she said to me, like, this newsletter changed my day and in turn maybe changed my life. And that's what it's about for me, is such a bigger picture, and knowing that you can't really put a monetary value to that. That didn't pay my bills. That didn't bring more money into the bank. But what it did was bring me an energetic currency that I think so often translates to a tangible monetary currency. And for me, being able to recognize this path that I've been on, in a sense of leaving the corporate world, having these plans, not necessarily sticking to them, doing something different, pivoting, having these doors open, recognizing that I can have my narrow lens in which I believe I'm going to do things and I believe things are going to come together. And God, source, the universe, everything larger than me, the energetic codes in which we are all subconsciously living by, have such bigger plans. And if I looked at what I set out to do when I left the corporate world in comparison to what I'm doing right now, I would have failed. I didn't do what I said I was going to do, which was like rest and give myself time to recharge, et cetera, et cetera. But what a terrible perspective to navigate the world, instead of saying, holy cow, look where I am. And I never could have imagined this. And I never could have dreamed, 6 months ago that this is what I would be doing today. So imagine in the next 6 months, like what new opportunities will open for you, for your life, if as long as you are listening to that intuition, leaning into those pings and those whispers, and ensuring that every single day you're moving a little bit closer to the dream life that you're on your way to create. And if you pause and get honest with yourself and say, what am I doing right now that's going to bring me there? And the answer is nothing. What's a small change you can make? What's some way that you can hold yourself accountable to ensure that when you ask yourself that question next week, you'll have something you can add to the list? I think we often get in ruts or in these funks where it just feels like our arms and legs are being pulled in all these directions, and we're not even stopping to ask ourselves if it's where we want to go. And maybe we don't even know where we want to go. But what a beautiful opportunity to sit in that and get quiet and journal or meditate and listen and be really clear on asking for some guidance in what direction you're meant to be taken, and realize that it's often in directions that you can't even think up with your own like small mind. Your worldly mind doesn't have the ability to do so. But there's so much going on behind the scenes and happening for you, and often falling apart to come together, or maybe being removed for your life for protection. I always say that rejection is protection and redirection. It's so necessary and important in our lives, because without rejection, without doors closing, we would never have new doors open. We would never have new opportunities around the corner. And so, while as painful as it can be to see things come to a close, to claw at the friendships, the relationships, the professional situations, the housing situation, the just different dynamics that feel like they're coming to an end, I will acknowledge it is very painful. And yet they both exist together, that oftentimes without those things closing, we wouldn't have the opportunities that end up coming right around the corner. And sometimes when those things are happening, I'll feel this double-edged sword, because half of me is actually really excited to see what's going to be brought into my life. Because once space is created, it is then filled with things that we never could have imagined. And so there's moments that I'm like, okay, this is the moment I've been waiting for. What's next? I'm so excited to see what's next. And to circle back to this recent experience of travel, I have a couple of girlfriends that had already booked this trip. They'd had it on the calendar for quite a while. I was in a moment of my life where, as exciting as everything was around me, I feel like I had lost a semblance of self. I had lost connection to self. I had lost the essence of my favorite version of me. And I felt like day in and day out, I was still going through the motions. I was still proud of myself. I was still building. I was still making things happen. But when the opportunity presented to jump into part of their trip, every single thing in the world was against it working. Like, I have a wedding this coming weekend I'm going to, so there's no way I could have been on their same flights. When I initially looked up the flight they were on the way there, one way was $3,500. You're absolutely crazy if you think I'm going to spend $3,500 on an economy flight to Corfu, Greece. And there was just a lot of things that were sort of roadblocks in the way that made me continuously say, maybe this just isn't meant to happen. And yet I continued to be open to the possibility and said, if it's meant to be, it will present in a way that it'll feel like a no-brainer. It'll feel like, absolutely, like, how could I say no to this almost? And, they're wonderful friends. They've seen the funk I've been in a little bit, and they were really pushing for me to go. They were really supportive in saying, like, we can make it work. Like, they didn't even have their whole entire itinerary figured out. And so I was going to have to leave early. And they were like, we can work around what you figure out. And no matter what, it's possible, it's doable. And so I had such an incredible support and backing in that. And then, day in and day out, I'm searching flights. It kept feeling like this is not going to happen. And then there was a day that I was with one of my girlfriends. We pulled up these flight options. I ended up finding flights that were cheaper than the ones they got. And I was able to buy 3/4 of the flights with my points. And so the trip, the airfare itself, cost me near to nothing. And I ended up on a flight the exact same day as they left. And I just got into Corfu, Greece 30 minutes after them. And so it was kind of a no-brainer. Like, they'll already be there. They'll get the bags and whatever. Spoiler alert, the bags didn't make it. So they ended up filing claims instead. And then I'll make it there. And then the way back was a little rough. I decided to leave. We were in Montenegro, and I decided to leave from the Dubrovnik, Croatia airport, which was like a 45-minute drive from where we were staying. And my flight left at 6:15 a.m. So I had to be up at 3 a.m. to head home, and it was chaotic. And spoiler alert again, my bags didn't make it home, but everything is right in the world. It's here now. And so there were things about it, though, that just felt very aligned and felt like a yes. And when I really got honest with myself and paused to ask, like, what is it that I want and need right now, it was resounding that what I needed was to go on this trip. And I think that oftentimes in life, we out logic our intuition, and maybe there's something that we really want to do or we're feeling called to explore or lean into, and we will always be able to find reasons to out logic. We will always be able to find reasons to stick with the safe bet, to keep the safety net beneath us, to not leap, to not explore opportunities that are maybe against the grain or not the norm or different than what we're used to. And I think that this chapter of my life has just continued to really open the door of, like, why not? And if it feels aligned and if you're feeling called to do it, what a beautiful gift to give yourself, to listen to what you want and need rather than what the rest of the world is saying you want and need. And I found myself on this trip again. I found so many little dusty corners of myself that have been lost for the last few months, definitely. And I'd say longer than that, maybe even close to 8 months at this point. I mean, we can continue going backwards. And there was little corners and pieces and morsels of myself I found that maybe I lost years ago. And I think that it was so perfectly timed, and it was so soul filling, and also really, really relationally filling for me, in a sense of having these two girlfriends that we know in and out one another. We know each other so well. We're able to spend 24/7 together and laugh and cry and talk about everything under the sun, and have moments where we talk about nothing, but we're just sharing space with each other. And not that I didn't already know this, but it just really drove home how incredible friendship is. And I'll speak again for the collective of the women listening. Female friendship, it is the fiercest, most loyal, incredible love I've ever experienced. And my last night there, I had grand plans to go to bed early since I had to be up at 3 a.m. And we went to a winery, and then we had a bottle of wine with dinner, and we really did it up big for my last night out, a big hurrah. And we got back to the hotel, and we stayed up for a couple hours, laying in the bed with all of our heads touching together, crying, laughing. I mean, laughing so hard I thought I was going to throw up. And that moment of the entire trip, it's so funny. We weren't at the top of the Eiffel Tower. We weren't looking out in the vast landscape of Albania. We weren't at the most Michelin star dinner. We were laying in a hotel bed, head to head, laughing until we cried. And it was one of my favorite moments of the whole trip. It truly was so connected, and made me realize again that that's the most important thing of all. It's not always about the actual destination or the site we're going to see or the view from the top of the mountain. It's who's around us, who's by our side, who's doing it with us. And that's for the highs and the lows. I've experienced some pretty significant lows in the last few months, moments that I would not have made it through without my support system and my friends and the people willing to come spend the night with me, so I didn't have to be alone, and wake up with me so I didn't have to wake up alone, and check in on me and make sure I've eaten, and, allow people in. I'm really, really good at being let in to other people, to showing up for them, to sitting with them in moments of their grief and pain. And I used to say it was very difficult for me to let other people in, but I'm really working on my semantic hygiene and how I speak about myself and how I speak about the things that I want to come into existence. And I will truly say that it is not hard for me to let people in any longer for the right people. My tiny army that have shown up for me over and over and over again have the opportunity to see me in every single version of myself unapologetically without me thinking twice. I don't censor. I don't try to make it pretty. I don't, try to soften the rough edges. I get to be 100% me. And what a beautiful example then to me as I explore partnership in an intimate way and as I navigate the dating climate and the potential of becoming a mom in the future. And again, that's something that I am not fearful of doing on my own. I'm careful about never saying doing it alone, because it won't be alone. It may be without a romantic partner, but the amount of people surrounding me and showing up for me will make it so I will never do anything alone. And I hope if you're listening, you have people in your life that fill that same space within your heart in ensuring that you feel like you would never have to navigate anything alone. And if it feels like there are other things you're making a priority above those connections and relationships, I would urge you to water that grass, to water those gardens, to make sure that your relationships know they are first priority in your life, that connection is first priority. Everything else is second fiddle. I don't know if that's a phrase, but it just came into my mind. I feel like I've heard people say that. Everything else is second fiddle to your friends. Your friends have got to be first fiddle. Your connections have got to be the first thing in your life, because without that, nothing else really matters. And you can reach all the success in the world or have all the dreams come true, and it's going to feel pretty lonely at the top. And I'm so glad I chose to listen to my intuition and to make this trip happen. And, admittedly, there are kind of financial burdens right now that aren't as common to me, because I was in the corporate world and I had wonderful benefits and a salary I could rely on and all of these things. But again, like, it's excuses in the big picture. And I know that it's so privileged and such a unique and not always accessible opportunity for me to be able to travel internationally. But I would say if you can save the money to go get away with friends for a hotel that you all split X amount of ways for the night, or drive to the mountains. And I know the fall is coming, so it's probably not as warm, but like, go camp, go in nature, go out into wilderness, like, do something that gets you out of your normal routine. And it's possible no matter what. I think that the kind of spectrum at which it's accessible to people, I understand shifts and changes. I don't think it's feasible for everyone to go take a 2-week trip to Europe. However, again, the biggest source of connection I had was laying head to head with my girlfriends in a hotel bed, laughing until we cried. And that's accessible to everyone. That's something that, you can create space for. And so if you're feeling a little disconnected, or like you need to zoom out and have your senses sharpened and to see things for the first time and experience things for the first time, go do that. Put yourself in situations where you're doing things, seeing things, tasting things, smelling things, exploring things, hearing things for the first time. That's accessible right outside your door. That's accessible in your community. That's accessible for free. That's accessible in ways that are so tangible to everyone listening. And if it feels like you're in a bit of a rut, if it feels like you just are kind of going through the motions and doing the same things every day, find a way to zoom out. Find a way to experience something for the first time. And I can promise you, you won't regret it. You may not love it. It might not be something that you want to do again, but you'll leave with a renewed perspective. And that's what I've come home with, is such a renewed perspective. And so I just want to talk about a few different components of this whole theory and kind of construct of zooming out, to dive in, to learn yourself and get to know yourself even better. And the first one that comes up with for me is relationship dynamics. So it's really easy to get to a place of tunnel vision with your partners, especially your romantic partner, and then with close friends in your life. It's really easy to decide in your mind how they're going to react to something, to make up stories in your mind of how they feel about things without actually asking them. And in moments of conflict, to see things with such a narrow lens that we don't even give them the opportunity to be a person. I think it's really important to remind ourselves that everyone around us is doing the best they can with what they have. And sometimes that doesn't meet the standard of the best in which we hold ourselves to. Sometimes that doesn't meet the expectation we have for the way that our relationships will perform within our lives. And that might be time to make a change or to have a tough conversation or to make a shift. But I think that when I look back on some situations in my life when there was conflict and the way in which I looked at something as though I was the measuring stick, you shouldn't be feeling that way. You shouldn't be saying that. You should see my perspective. You should feel like this way. I always ask myself now, like, what gives me the right to be the measuring stick? No one has told us there's this guidebook to life, and the way that I believe something is to be true is exactly what the other person has to feel. And some of the things that I experience that come from childhood trauma or attachment or whatever it may be, old patterning that has nothing to do with the person in front of me, it can feel irrational and it can feel really, really big, a really big feeling that somebody else feeling and experiencing the exact same thing would not even be activated by. And so I think that when we are in a place that feels uncomfortable with a friend, with a romantic partner, with a husband, wife, sister, mother, father, colleague, whomever it may be, if we can just take a pause and zoom out, hover above the situation, take perspective of somebody that is the next room over, take perspective of somebody that's in another state, another country. What would they perceive if they witness the situation outside of your body and outside of your partner or your friend's body, whomever you're having this discussion with? What would they perceive if they looked at it? And if they knew nothing, which I understand, our patterning and the patterns of those around us give us information that is useful. If somebody lies to us once and says it won't happen again, and then they lie to us again, it eventually becomes a boundary in which we have to uphold. And what that means is removing ourselves from that situation if that's not something we're willing to tolerate. So I'm not saying throw everything out the window and just like see things with blind eyes, but maybe see things with blind eyes for this particular response. And look at the situation in a way that like allows you to give yourself grace, but also maybe extend a little bit of grace to the person in the situation with you as well. Are they experiencing something that's super activating to their nervous system? Are they intentionally hurting you? Or is their nervous system flooded and they're responding or reacting in the only way they feel equipped to do in that moment? Zooming out as well can mean looking futuristically. This feels really, really big and really heavy and really charged right now. But in a week or a month or a year, what would this situation feel like if I looked back on it? How do I want to behave so that I'm proud in a month or a year about this exact situation? A lot of times, even thinking about it tomorrow or next week releases some of the charge around it. Right now, it feels like an emergency. Right now, the inner child in me is banging on the walls of my heart and lungs and making everything feel compressed, and my blood pressure is rising, and I feel so stressed the F out. But tomorrow, I will feel different. And I don't want to look back on the situation and say, oh my gosh, I wish that I would have just given that a beat and taken a breather and not been a keyboard warrior or responded right away and reacted, out of emotion. And so if we can just zoom out, ask ourselves how we want to feel about it in a week or a month, ask ourselves if this situation and the charge it has is going to be as charged in a week or a month. And maybe it will be, and that's okay. If it's something that's a really, really big deal, this isn't quite the episode for that, because there are definitely moments that are extremely worthy of that charge and of us making some very big decisions and changes. This is the day-to-day, the times in which a lot of those big things may have created patterning within our DNA and bones that cause us to want to react instead of respond, and asking ourselves if we can just pause. And I've heard a phrase that, I don't always practice, but that I do agree with, that says, if it's not going to matter in 5 years, don't give it more than 5 minutes right now. And I think the whole purpose of that is just saying in 5 years, if this tiff, if this like the person snapped at you, maybe, okay, if that's a pattern, absolutely deserving of a larger conversation. But in this one moment, this person kind of snapping, is it worth more than a 5-minute energetic expenditure? Our energy is not limitless. We have a finite amount of energy within us to give, and that's like on a physics basis. It's not something that I'm just like, it's not the woo woo. Energy can become woo woo for sure when we talk about different vibrations where, frequencies we're vibrating at, all these different things. But just in general, we only have so much energy to expend. And so what are we going to choose to spend it on? And that's not saying that the other person isn't wrong or they didn't hurt us or they're not incorrect or they didn't do something that they should apologize for or whatever it may be. It's that we are responsible and we are in charge of and we are capable of determining what gets our energy. And that is kind of a superpower because somebody can wrong me a lot and I can feel really charged about it. And I can also say, okay, I'm going to move on with my day. I'm not going to give this energy right now. I don't actually have the energy to spend on it. My energy is being spent elsewhere. And so we can discuss this at a point in time when I have the energy to give it. What a freaking mic drop, right? And what an ability to reduce the charge around the situation. This is not an emergency to me. We can talk about it when we talk about it. I've got to move forward with the things of my day, and I will make time to discuss this. Say it is something that is more requiring. It's with an intimate partner. It's with something that we need to address. I'm not ever advocating for like ghosting or avoiding. It's just saying I don't have the energy to give this right now, and that's okay. You're allowed to do that. But when you've been raised and conditioned to believe you have to be a people pleaser and everything's an emergency and you have to make sure that everything is right now or else the house is going to burn down and everything's going to crumble around you, it feels really uncomfortable to say, not now, later. We can talk about this later. Because that is so against that please love me, please choose me feeling that we often operate from. So with relational dynamics, zooming out, looking futuristically, asking yourself what energy you have to give at this moment on this particular thing, exhaling it, setting a protective energetic force field around you, moving forward, practicing self-soothing, practicing your own ability to calm and ground and regulate your nervous system, and then addressing it when the charge is down. And what a different outcome that ends up being brought to us when we face things in that way. The next thing is kind of an interesting exercise I like to do that I sort of mentioned earlier, and that is ensuring that the orientation in which we are moving is in alignment with and going to get us to the places that we're hoping to go. I like to do an exercise where I ask myself where I want to be, say in 50 years. So in 50 years, I'll be 84. That's crazy. Where do I see myself? Who am I with? What am I doing? What's surrounding me? And then move backwards. So 40 years from now, what will I need to be doing to actually have that be the outcome 50 years from now? And then it's tricky to obviously go and then 30 and then 20 and whatever. But more than anything, the purpose of this exercise is to say, if that's where I want to be in 50 years, what do I actually need to be doing today? And am I doing anything today that's going to get me there? I hope listeners right now, I hope you guys are able to say yes to a lot of things. This exercise is not to shame you or to make you feel bad or to make you turn your life upside down. It's to say, my hope for you is when you ask yourself if the things you're doing today are going to get you to your dream life, the answer is a resounding yes. And I am on track in so many ways. And the only things that are not maybe quote on track are things that are out of my control and things that I've released to the universe and that I recognize will come into my life at the exact timing they are meant to. And I think that often allows us a lot more autonomy in not putting our future and our happiness and our like, I'll be happy when X, Y, and Z into someone else's hands. If you decide that you are not going to be happy until you're in a committed marriage, say, you are putting all of your happiness in the hands of somebody that you don't even know exists. You don't know where they are. You don't know what they're doing. You're giving all of your power away. And you're also creating this real estate within your brain, heart, mind, emotions, where so much of that percentage is going to something that like maybe doesn't exist. That's like me saying, I will be happy when the United States splits into two countries and one of the sides of it is called Appleton and I live in Appleton. Okay, that sounds nuts. I'm not saying that finding partnership isn't going to happen, but it's just as abstract as me coming up with something like that. I'll be happy when I have a dog that has 8 legs. Okay, like you sound crazy. And then every single day, I'm only going to live my life searching for a dog that has 8 legs, and nothing else can bring me happiness, and nothing else can bring me fulfillment. And I cannot be content with my life until I've got this dog on my lap with 8 legs and I live in Appleton because the United States has been broken into 2 territories. Do you understand how disempowering that is? And again, I do believe everything you desire is already yours. The partnership, the marriage, the kids, the family, the community, the home, the travel, the career, whatever it may be that you're so desiring of. Zero part of me is saying, throw that out the window. It's never going to happen. Be happy now. It's saying, do not allow yourself to not experience joy, happiness, connection, fulfillment, contentment until you have those things. Because you're putting all of that into a basket that is not in front of you and not in your hands, and not allowing yourself to feel the joy of the present moment and the here and the now and the gratitude that exists right this second. All of us could experience life-changing news while we're listening to this episode, or an hour after, or tomorrow, or next week. And what a shame would it be if we spent all of our time leading up to that news saying, I will be happy when. So zoom out to the dream life, work backwards, ask yourself if the things you're doing right now are orienting and aligning your ship, your compass with that life. And then relax in proportion to those things happening. Allow them to, believe they will. Be so freaking happy with your life now. And then anything else is just an addition to that. And that's a very, very beautiful place to be. The next part when it comes to zooming out is kind of in conflict. And I sort of already talked about this in relational dynamics, but I think when we face conflict, it often feels like a me versus you. It's a me versus whoever else is there, or me versus this issue that involves other people. And zooming out allows us to say, how can we both get to the same side of the river? It is not me versus you. If it always has to be me versus you and I always have to be right, you're going to live a pretty grumpy life and disconnected. Because sometimes the biggest blessing in the world is having conflict with somebody that we love, getting to the same side of the river, and then exploring that side of the river together and having them by our side. Being able to say, I'm sorry, being able to perspective take, to say, I completely understand why it would feel that way or why you feel that way. What I'm hearing is you're saying that I haven't been prioritizing you and I haven't been making plans with you in the way that you're used to or where your needs lie. And I can understand why that would feel really sad and confusing and frustrating and cause you to question this connection. I also hope you can understand I've been really busy. I have this thing on my plate that is nearing an end, whatever it may be. And I will also really prioritize making time for you, for us. What would feel the best to you in this? How can we resolve this? How can we get on the same side of the river? Do you hear how different that conversation is versus I'm busy and you never understand, and why can't you just listen to how I feel? And they're saying, you're not making time for me. You don't care about me. Why can't you see how I feel? I mean, that's a losing battle. It's not a me versus you. But when you zoom out, when you go above the issue, when you hover above yourself and whoever it is, and again, all of the charge and the childhood trauma and the attachment at play, and you're able to see it from a different perspective, you can find the humility and the put the ego aside in saying, I totally hear you. That would feel really frustrating. I understand why you're upset about that. I apologize that my actions have caused this feeling within you, and I care about you and prioritize you, and I want us to get on the same side of the river together. How can it be us against the problem, not me versus you? So using that zoom out technique, again, not responding or not reacting, but responding, letting things lose their charge a little bit, but then coming at it from a place of, let's tackle this together. Let's be on the same team. Huge, huge, huge difference. I've already spoken about travel, but I do think that travel, getting out of our norm, shaking things up, like I said, see, hear, taste, smell, experience something for the first time, as small or as large as it feels like you would need that to be, that can then bleed over into those relationships, professional dynamics, coworkers, whatever it may be. Doing something together, finding that connection and bonding and experiencing something in that way can just be so activating in a good way, expansive for us within those relationships, partnerships, dynamics, and then definitely with self, challenging ourselves to go do something different. Maybe we also just start a new habit. Start our morning every morning with just opening a notebook and jotting down 5 things we're thankful for and starting the day that way. It may seem super small. It takes 30 seconds. But adding something new to our life that allows us to zoom out, allows us to get out of that like exact narrow mind that we're in. And I don't want zoom out to be confused with avoidance or like dissociating, because obviously that would be counteractive to everything I said when I started this. Be all there wherever you are. Zooming out, I think, allows you to be all there even more so, because you're not looking at things through like the tiniest little telescope. You're moving the telescope away from your eyes, and you're allowing yourself to look around and really absorb exactly where you are. So that's something that maybe could be confusing when listening, like, well, you're uncomfortable in your life, go skydive, go rock climb, go try something new. It's not to get away from what it is you're doing. It's to reconnect with the world around you. And in turn, that allows you to connect even deeper to the life in which you're living. And maybe going out and doing something new, the whole time you're doing it, all you want is to return to that life. And it gives you a new perspective of gratitude for what it is you have and what it is you want to come back to. Or maybe when you're away doing that thing, you learn some really hard truths about the experiences that you're in. When I went to Scotland, I was planning on coming back to my corporate job feeling so recharged and rejuvenated and ready to dive in. And every single day of the trip that passed, I felt constriction in my chest knowing it was one day closer to going back to work. And that was a huge signal for me that it was time to make a change. And I think I made it like two or 3 weeks, I don't even know, but from getting back from that trip, it wasn't even a month, because it also wasn't fair to the job I was at. If I was going to be checked out, that's not fair. That's not in integrity with how I operate and how I live my life. And so that zoom out made me reach some difficult conclusions about some changes I needed to make in my life. And I have used that in other aspects when it comes to difficult decisions, in being able to kind of reframe my perspective and then come back with a new set of eyes. We can use a zooming out practice daily. It's something that we can start challenging ourselves when we feel uncomfortable, when we feel reactive, when our emotions are heightened or we're not super regulated. We can stop and take a deep breath and zoom out and allow ourselves to see that there is a whole world around us operating, and everyone around us is in their own little zoomed in world. And when I find myself ruminating, or especially if I'm in a space of like shame or embarrassment, or, you leave somewhere and you're like, was I weird the whole time? Like, did I act crazy? Whatever. When you zoom out and you think about the fact that like there's somebody walking their dog outside your house right now who doesn't give a shit about what you did at the party or what you said, it's really humbling in a good way to be like, it's just not always about me. And I can be confident that the people I love and care about will say something to me if it needs to be said. And if not, I can assume everything is fine. And that's a really peaceful way to navigate relationship. All of my friends know that. There's nothing wrong unless you say something's wrong. And of course, if I do something that I feel I need to apologize for, or I know in my heart was wrong, of course. but it's more of that kind of like anxious brain that comes into play and starts tricking us into the fact that all of our friends secretly hate us and everyone in our life thinks we're ridiculous and whatever. It allows us to zoom out from that and say, if no one has said that to me, that is a story I'm telling myself in my mind, and it's objectively not true. And also in these moments of rumination, I can zoom out and recognize that like Sally down the street is sitting there ruminating about if she acted weird at her book club the night before, and she's not thinking for a second about whether I acted weird at my friend's house, whatever. I just think that it's kind of a helpful tool to recognize that we are tiny little idiots in the big scheme of things, and we're just surrounded by other tiny little idiots, and we're all so consumed with ourselves and our lives and our thoughts and our perception of others and their perception of us, and it's just exhausting if we allow ourselves to get super sucked into it and really not productive. And so I think that allowing ourselves to zoom out can just be such a beautiful gift to ourselves, to those around us, to our future, to our lives, to our dreams, to allow ourselves to see that point A to point Z. It's really, really easy to get super in the weeds of A point 1, point 2, point 3. And sometimes giving ourselves the gift and the exhale of even just seeing point B or point R or whatever is a little bit down the road and around the corner can give us the energy and the reframe and the perspective and the motivation to dive back into A.1C, And so I hope if you're listening to this, you can find ways to zoom out today or tomorrow or this week. And if there's something that you've been chewing on for a while and you feel like is just kind of lingering and you don't have clarity on it, zoom out from that. Ask the universe for a sign. Ask the universe for clarity. I will find that if I ask the universe for clarity in something, or maybe with someone in particular, I get it so freaking fast. And sometimes it's not the clarity I want, but it's the clarity that I need to see for the decisions I need to make. And so I also operate from, hey, universe, I'm feeling confusion about this. I'd love some clarity. Can you please bring clarity to me in a way that I won't be able to deny? Like it will be so clear that it is not something that's left up to interpretation. And then I let it go. I don't ruminate. I don't sit there and reread messages and talk to everyone around me about it and stress about what's going to come. And then when I get the clarity, whether it's positively or negatively charged, whether it's what I wanted or what I didn't want, I thank the universe for the clarity. I use it as information to move forward, and I move forward. And it's such a better, for me, way of navigating things than trying to do all of it on my own and trying to become a detective to figure out the answers and try to wield my future from every little cellular level. Because the more I plan, the more it doesn't go as planned, but the more incredible it actually ends up being. And I hope that if you have dreams, I hope you have dreams. If you have dreams you're thinking about, if you have things that you are wanting to chase or explore, you'll allow yourself to get quiet and listen to that nudge and that intuition. And you'll allow yourself to make tiny decisions that move you into alignment more so with those things and allow you to find connection to self first and foremost and use yourself as counsel first as foremost when you need to make a decision. Listen to what your gut and what your head and heart are telling you before you listen to what everyone else in the world has to say about it. Because more often than not, that initial feeling that you have within you is 1,000% correct and is so worthy of being listened to. Whether it makes sense or not, you can trust yourself and the feeling within your body. And if you don't, little by little, by little, by little, your body will keep telling you until you are ill, until you are exhausted, until you have depression that's keeping you from even getting out of bed, because every single day you've moved further and further and further away from your connection to self. I feel restored, revived, excited, hopeful, and I sat in this exact same desk 3 weeks ago and felt the opposition of all of those feelings. So if you're listening to this, I also want to remind you that no feeling is final. And if you're finding yourself in a rut or a low or a murky lack of clarity, you can pop your head out of the water, take a deep breath, clean your goggles off, go back in, and find clearer waters. Find clarity. Clarity is there. Peace is yours. Freedom is yours. A life that feels good on the inside, not just looks good on the outside, is yours. You're deserving of it. You're worthy of it. You're worthy of your own love and forgiveness and patience and grace first and foremost. And I hope that you can take some time to zoom out this week to dive in deeper to connection with yourself. I freaking love you guys. Thank you for showing up for me every single week. It's an honor to show up for you. As always, I'm always in your corner. I'd love to hear from you. If something from this episode resonated, you can always reach out to me on Instagram or hello@rednailenergy.com via email. And I will catch you guys on the next week. On the next week. I will catch you guys next week on the next episode. Words are hard. I am done talking. Love you guys. Mean it. Talk to you soon.